Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.net. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll continue now where we left off last time in the book Rome and Civil Liberty by James A. Wiley. This is a historical account of the for lack of a better term, the violent overthrow of the British government by papal aggression back in the 1860s. And we use the lessons learned in this book to comprehend what is literally happening in our country today. Rome attempted to establish a replacement government by simply installing in Great Britain and England the Roman Catholic hierarchy. What we are never told about the cardinals, the archbishops, the bishops, and the priests of the Roman Catholic Church, they form a civil government. And they are bound by Roman Catholic canon law, which are the decrees of the popes. So literally, when a country, in this case Great Britain, and we might well assume the United States of America, both having Roman Catholic hierarchical structures in the country's being divided up into dioceses, over which reigns cardinals and archbishops and bishops and priests, we have a replacement government. A kingdom within a kingdom, a nation within a nation. And the head of that papal nation is the biblical Antichrist, the papacy. Now, what is the object of this parallel government? It's to impose upon the citizens of the country Roman Catholic canon law. Roman Catholic canon law is not, as most assume, just a spiritual law, a means of governing over spiritual things. No, that's not it. Roman Catholic canon law is civil law, and a civil means to achieve religious aims. So what we have growing up in the United States is the very same thing that was growing up in England in 1865. A hostile overthrow of the legitimate government. Okay, now with that preparatory lesson, we'll continue where we left off last time on the last full paragraph on page 56 of this book. The author, James A. Wiley, says, the real object and aim of the papal aggression, plainly, as briefly stated by Cardinal Wiseman, was to introduce canon law, Roman Catholic canon law. This announcement awakened little alarm, for this reason, that its real significance was scarcely perceived. The sound struck upon the nation's ear, but the sense failed to reach its understanding. Had the cardinal said that he came to claim pontifical jurisdiction over every baptized person in Great Britain, and to compel or force submission in time convenient by fine, by imprisonment, and by death, the announcement would have startled us. Or even had he said that he came to introduce into England the common law of the Roman states, first over a sixth or so of Her Majesty's subjects, that is, the Roman Catholics in Great Britain, and ultimately, as he hoped, over them all, the intimation would have awakened our fears. But the cardinal warily avoided a plainness of speech that would have been so very dangerous. He quietly let fall, as if they had been words of course, the harmless intimation, as it seemed, that he had come to inaugurate canon law. Canon law, it was believed by most, was purely a spiritual code. Nowadays, no ways different from the disciplinary rules of other dissenting bodies, and would, just like as little as theirs, interfere with the prerogatives of the sovereign and the rights of the subject. Can there, it was asked, be greater danger to liberty in the Church of Rome carrying out her discipline than there is of the Protestant Church carrying out hers? If it shall be found, it was further argued, that there is a civil element in canon law which will bring it into conflict with the Constitution of the country, how easy will it be for us to confront and repel that element by the application of the law of the land? Surely the ghostly authority of the cardinal can be no match for the material and temporal power of the kingdom. If the cardinal directs the conscience, we govern the body. His hat cannot overtop Queen Victoria's crown, and canon law must go down before British law. We had the Church of Rome in the country before. We have had that church in the country still. Only her bishops, instead of pretending to govern us from Babylon and from Trachonitis or from some other far-off land, and it may be fabulous region, have now done us the honor of assuming the designation of our own cities. So did the most part reason, and reasoned thus. They felt very much at ease in prospect of the new regime. Another example of that security which arises from ignorance. Okay? The people, what James A. Wiley is telling us, that the cardinal was so crafty and careful in his language in setting up the hierarchy that he failed to reach the understanding of the people. And as I said before, certainly those in the legitimate government of England fully comprehended what the papacy was attempting to do through the establishment of the Roman Catholic hierarchy in Great Britain. It was the people who remained ignorant. And in this case, ignorance is not bliss. Roman Catholic canon law is not a spiritual law such as the other churches. The other churches, no matter what denomination you call from, they have their organizational structures, but they busy themselves only with spiritual things. Roman Catholic canon law, on the other hand, is not a spiritual law, it's a temporal law. And it always comes into conflicts with the temporal laws of every land that it is introduced into. So, James A. Wiley is trying to inform his British citizens, his British friends, that they have ignorantly allowed a hostile foreign potentate to insert his jurisdiction into Protestant Great Britain. Still failing to recognize the papacy as the Antichrist and the Roman Catholic Church as the synagogue of Satan, he's trying to appeal to the common wisdom of every man in Great Britain without using such language. But I'm not as tactful, possibly, as James A. Wiley, and I don't beat around the bush too much. I get right to the point. What's happening in Great Britain is not only the overthrow of the Protestant crown and the Parliament and the legitimate elected government of England. It's an overthrow of Christ himself. Now, he continues, it is to be feared that our people still very imperfectly understand the tremendous inroad that is made upon our Constitution when a Roman Catholic bishop presumes to assume the title of an English prelate. We have not the slightest objection to a Roman Catholic bishop as such. Roman Catholics are, and have long been, as much entitled to their bishops as the Church of England and Ireland have to theirs. Further, too, they are quite at liberty to style themselves, if they please, Roman Catholic bishops in Liverpool, in Birmingham, or elsewhere. But when Dr. Ullathorne starts up Lord Bishop of Birmingham, he assumes a title which only the Queen can bestow, and with it a legislative function which no sovereign can bestow without the sanction of Parliament. The Queen herself cannot create new bishoprics, for the simple reason that according to the English Constitution, they govern in spiritual things the diocese over which they are placed. They exercise magisterially spiritual powers, and are indeed entitled, with the exception of the junior bishop, to a seat in the House of Lords. When therefore Dr. Ullathorne proclaims himself, or which is the same thing, permits Roman Catholics to proclaim him to the world as Lord Bishop of Birmingham, he means to inform us that he has a full right to the territorial government of Birmingham in spiritual things. The law by which he has a right to govern is the canon law of Rome, and it is thus he gives us the polite information that he hopes and intends one day to take underneath his fostering wing not only the clergy and the laity of the Church of England, but the congregation of the Reverend Angel James, those of the Wesleyan ministers, the Scotch churches, and all other quote-unquote heretics of whatever name. So now are you getting the picture? That simply by claiming himself to be the prelate of Birmingham, the bishop of Birmingham, he is claiming himself to be ruler over all of the residents of that district, both Catholic and Protestant. Now, James A. Wiley continues. He says, if we had weighed the real significance of the Cardinal's words, we would have been the better able to gauge the quiet but irresistible power that lay hid in his acts. We would have seen that the Church of Rome in Great Britain had undergone a great transformation, that it was no longer what it had been for a century or more, and that the Cardinal had deposited at the bottom of it a principle which necessitated that from that day forward it should grow, should encroach, and should at last precipitate itself in open conflict upon the British liberty and law. The die had been cast as regarded the future relations of his church to the Empire of Great Britain. The truce, which had lasted for 160 years between the two, was at an end, and war was again proclaimed. All right? For 160 years, Rome, or rather Britain, Protestant Great Britain, had tolerated Roman Catholics. Now, the papacy has declared open warfare against the legitimate government of England simply by installing his hierarchy. Because according to Roman Catholic canon law, the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church is a civil government. It governs not only over spiritual things, but over temporal things as well. And so it was an invasion of the country. It was a hostile overthrow of the legitimate government. He says, now we pray the reader to pause and to reflect. What is there wanting here which a temporal kingdom should possess? We do not say a spiritual kingdom. We affirm that we have the entire organization of a temporal dominion set up on British soil, and alongside the throne of our Queen, we have in the first place a king. We have in the second place a law. And we have in the third place a pretty numerous body of subjects. A king, a law, subjects. This is a kingdom. We grant all this, say some, but then is not this just what may be said of any other church or ecclesiastical body in the country? Have not they a king or a head? Have not they disciplinary rules or a law? And do not their members or subjects in some cases amount to millions? Is the Church of Rome any more an empire within an empire than they are? It is at this point that men go wrong. It is at this point that Rome comes in with her great deception. And imposing on men by that deception, she proceeds unchallenged by us, nay, even with our aid, to introduce a civil element into the nation, and to erect a temporal kingdom which insults the independence of the country and by silent and subtle means undermines its liberties. Her political aims are masked by spiritual pretenses and pushed forward by spiritual agencies. That renders them the more formidable. Her true character, nevertheless, is of easy demonstration, would men only admit what is demonstrated to them. Rome wields a vast power of deception, but the better half of that power lies in the fact that men are so willing to be deceived. Great is her adroitness, perfect her jugglery, consummate her craft. Still, it were easy to unmask that craft, to lay bare that jugglery, to defeat and disarm that adroitness, were men but willing to listen to proof, or ready to follow up what is proved by corresponding action. And it's exactly the same way today. James A. Wiley is making his greatest attempt to wake up the British citizenry to the reality, not just the mere accusation, that the government of England was being overthrown by the papacy, and that another separate civil government was being installed that would answer to the Pope and not to the Queen or the Parliament or the citizenry of England. Now, the same warnings are going forth this morning to American citizens. Are there Roman Catholic cardinals in this country? Are there Roman Catholic archbishops? Are there Roman Catholic bishops? Are there Roman Catholic priests? Is the land marked out in dioceses? Then we have within this country a foreign nation growing up within the country that is hostile to our Constitution and most particularly to our Bill of Rights and ultimately to our faith. Faith in Christ and Him alone. And to the degree that the United States is losing its liberties, to the degree that the United States is fighting foreign wars for the benefit of that foreign potentate, the papacy, the United States is becoming Catholic. And the civil laws of this land are being conformed to Roman Catholic canon law. The object of the Roman Catholic Church, the object of the pontiff, is not only to govern Great Britain in 1865, but to govern lock, stock, and barrel the United States of America and every other nation in the world. And that's literally what the New World Order is. And we should all instantly recognize it for what it is, simply by knowing what the Old World Order was. And that's how they've deceived us. They've kept from us any knowledge of what the Old World Order was, when the Pope literally ruled over the kings of the earth. The United States no longer serves Christ. The United States civil governments are used to impose upon us Roman Catholic canon law and to make the Pope our God. That is the very purpose of the civil law of this country. Our civil government no longer responds to the people, and especially not to Protestant people. The civil government is responsible now to the papacy. And all of that, I believe, was finally decided at Vatican Council II. So, are we learning from the example of Great Britain in 1865? Is it becoming more clear in your mind exactly how we've been deceived? And now what we must do about it? He says, still, it were easy to unmask that craft, to lay bare that jugglery, to defeat and disarm that adroitness, were men but willing to listen to proof, or ready to follow up what is proved by corresponding action. Once for all, we say, so far as Rome is a church, let us tolerate her. So far as she is a monarchy, let us resist her. In the name of liberty, let us resist her, and by every means in our power. This, as it appears to us, is our true ground as citizens. Were James A. Wiley sitting in my chair this morning and reading his own book to you, what he said to the Britons in 1865 would equally apply to you. He said, once for all, we say, so far as Rome is a church, let us tolerate her. So far as she is a monarchy, let us resist her. In the name of liberty, let us resist her, and by every means in our power. This, as it appears to us, is our true ground as citizens. Are you truly an American citizen? Then your obligation to the preservation of our liberties, our Constitution, and our way of life is to oppose the papacy, to oppose Roman Catholic canon law, and to insist that our government pay no mind to the man of sin in Rome. And if not, then we very well can't consider ourselves Americans, and we certainly, for long, won't be counted as Protestants either. He continues, he says, as Christians, our relations to Rome are somewhat different. In our character as Christians, we are bound to resist even what is spiritual in Romanism. Rome is, and these 1,200 years has been, the grand opponent of the blessed gospel. Now James A. Wiley is finally getting to the punch. The papacy is not just an enemy of our civil liberties and our civil government. He is first and foremost the enemy of Christ. Now, if we have liberties to this country, all well and good. But if we don't have if we do not have allegiance to Christ, we have nothing. Not in this life or the life to come. And James A. Wiley is finally telling his Englishmen, this isn't a battle between Protestant Great Britain and the papacy. This is a battle, a war to the death between Christ and Antichrist. And we must make a choice in that war, in that decisive battle. Now, we'll continue after we come back from the break. You're listening to Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
If you'd like to get a copy of this program, you may subscribe at FirstAmendmentRadio.com for only $45 a month, and you'll receive an MP3 CD weekly of all of our programs. As a bonus, we'll send you a password for our audio archives online. That's a $15 value. Or you may request any month of any program on one MP3 CD for a minimum donation of only $25, or any single program on tape, MP3 CD, or CD for only $15. You may do all of this online at FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Just follow the instructions to make a donation or subscribe. You may also adopt an hour of your favorite program. Please don't forget that most of the programs on FirstAmendmentRadio.com are listener-supported. Don't do Internet? Then call 559-781-3773 and we'll be honored to help you. Thank you from all of us here at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. If you'd like to support Inquisition Update and keep this program on the air, please support First Amendment Radio, who sponsors it. And if you'd like to contact me, please do so by email. My email address is tom@seawaves.us. Tom@seawaves, just like the waves of the sea, tom@seawaves.us. Now, continuing where we left off before the break, James A. Wiley is finally getting down to brass tacks, where the rubber meets the road. As Christians, our relations to Rome, that is, our relations to the Vatican, are somewhat different. First of all, I want my listeners to know the Roman Catholic Church is not Christianity. It's anti-Christianity. And I challenge any one of my listeners, if you will take the time to study Roman Catholicism in comparison to the law of God and the Scriptures, you will agree. And if not, show me where you disagree. Roman Catholicism is at best paganism, wrapped in a cloak of Christianity. But any careful examination will reveal the wolf behind sheep's clothing. The Protestant reformers of Great Britain knew full well what Rome really represented, and they warned the whole nation. And because the gospel was finally read and understood by the British people, they cast Rome out of their country, lock, stock, and barrel. For 160 years, they had relative peace with Roman Catholics, but Rome never changes and Rome never relents. Just as Satan will never relent to try to overthrow Christ's kingdom, Rome will never relent to overthrow every country that has embraced Protestantism. Protestantism is true biblical Christianity. Rome is the virtual enemy of the truth. Now, James A. Wiley is going to use a word I don't use in relation to Rome, but he says, as Christians, our relations to Rome are somewhat different. In our character as Christians, we are bound to resist even what is spiritual in Romanism. His implication here is that we are not, as Christians, bound to resist Romanism only in civil matters, but spiritual as well. In other words, we are to resist Romanism in every form that it takes, if we are to be truly Christians. Just as much as we are for Christ, we must be against Antichrist. He continues, he says, Rome is, and these 1,200 years has been, the grand opponent of the blessed gospel. Its author she affronts, that is, Christ himself, she affronts and offends. And the souls of men she destroys. We cannot, therefore, without heinous guilt, view with indifference the continuance of such a system, much less its progress. And just in proportion as we love the souls of men, shall we with earnestness and vigor oppose that which destroys them. But to do so by pains and penalties were persecution. It were bootless as well as tyrannical. The spiritual can be resisted only by the spiritual. However erroneous we may deem the opinion of the papist, he has the most incontestable right to hold it, so far as man and human governments are concerned. We have no more right to forbid to him a belief in any one of the dogmas of his church, from the Immaculate Conception on downwards, than he has to enforce such a belief upon us. But up to the point where he encroaches on the rights of others, or invades the statutory liberties of the country, he may profess and worship as he pleases without challenge from man. If we combat his errors, it must be with argument only. It is with the light that we can make war upon the darkness. But as citizens, our conduct must be regulated by other considerations. Our first duty in our character of citizens is the safety of the state. We are solemnly bound to conserve its independence, to protect its liberties, and to uphold unimpaired the whole authority of its sovereign. If a jurisdiction is introduced which strikes at that jurisdiction of the Queen and the independence of the nation, in fact ignores both, it matters not by whom, nor under what specious pretexts and disguises. The loyal subject has but one course left to him. He must resist by the means competent to him as a citizen. That is, he must meet the political attack by a political defense. He betrays his country and he violates the fealty he owes to his sovereign if he does not. He connives at an invasion. He becomes a traitor to liberty. Shall we be traitors of our liberty here in the United States of America by not confronting this political juggernaut in Washington, D.C., called the papal hierarchy? Can we legitimately count ourselves as citizens of this country if we do not defend its Constitution against encroachment by a foreign hostile potentate called the papacy, who seeks to impose upon us Roman Catholic canon law and make us not only enemies of our own nation, of our own Constitution, but of our own Christ. That's the point James A. Wiley's making. Not only is the papacy the enemy of heaven, he is the enemy of mankind. He is not the vicar, as he claims, of Christ. He is the vicar of Satan himself. He is the human agency through which Satan seeks to overthrow everything that God established for man on this earth. And who among us could call ourselves citizens or patriots if we did not defend both our faith and our country from the man of sin in Rome? He continues now, he says, but the court of the Vatican has made such an invasion. It has installed in Great Britain another king. It has proclaimed over the nation another law. That king and that law claiming not simply jurisdiction over the souls of all baptized persons in Great Britain, but also a divine and infallible right to define their duties as subjects, to control their actions as citizens, and to dispose of their goods on the plea of religious obligation, forbidding all appeal from its enactments and declaring null and void all authority whatever, whether that of the Queen or of the Parliament or the magistrate, which shall interfere with its decisions. And it is proceeding to gather under the wing of its alien jurisdiction a large body of subjects, all of whom own the validity of its authority and yield themselves to it so far as the yet superior power of the British law will permit them. This is not a church. This is a monarchy, established no doubt under spiritual pretenses and by spiritual weapons, but not a whit less political on that account. Did you hear what James A. Wiley just said? The Roman Catholic Church is first and foremost a political institution. It seeks to control through the civil law, and the civil law must conform to Roman Catholic canon law, which is just the collection of all the papal decrees throughout history. The papacy claims itself to be the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and he will not stop his attempt to make himself the King of Kings and Lord of Lords all over this land. The only thing that's going to stop him is Christ's literal return, the true King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And should we just back off and lay down and wait for fate to take its course? Or shall we be part of the battle? Many are content to just sit back and sing in the choir and go to church and try to do good and just let the earth and all that's in it succumb to its fate. I'm not satisfied with that. I don't believe Christ is satisfied with that. And our country lies in the balance. Our liberties lie in the balance, and even our faith lies in the balance, because history proves over and over and over again, when Rome gets control, Protestantism is destroyed, and so are Protestants right along with it. Just as Rome once burned the Bible, and when that didn't work, she burned Bible readers right along with those Bibles, she'll do the same to Protestantism. First destroy Protestantism, and then destroy Protestants. It has happened so many times over and over again through history, it's remarkable that it wasn't predicted in this country long ago. This isn't rocket science. This is simply a matter of reading the Bible prophecies and to have a reasonable, workable study of history. And all of a sudden, all of our questions are answered. Now, shall we permit this alien kingdom to grow up before our eyes? The least we can demand in regard to it is, first, that so far as it is political, we shall resist it by legislative means. And second, that so far as it is spiritual, we shall refrain from endowing it. If we do the latter, endow it, we sin against God. And if we neglect the former, legislative attempts to overthrow Roman Catholic canon law in this country, we sin against our country. I would add, we sin against Christ. He says, let us sketch a little more in detail the organization and growth of this new Roman kingdom. Entitling the next portion of this chapter is The King of the New Kingdom. In giving a rapid sketch of the Roman kingdom which is rising among us, our first attention is due, of course, to its king. He does not indeed bear the name, but most assuredly he assumes the office, nor does he wear a crown. Now he's speaking of Cardinal Wiseman here, not the Pope, but he'll get to it, trust me. Nor does he wear a crown. His symbol of authority is a red hat. Okay, the cardinal wears red and a red hat. He announced his advent among us, like other sovereigns, by the use of royal pronoun. And he opened his mission in terms right royal and imperial. Quote, we govern and shall continue to govern, said the potentate in scarlet and fine linen, as he stepped upon the shores of a country which he deemed much more his master's than the Queen's. Okay, England he deemed to be much more a possession of his master in Rome, the Pope's, than that of the Queen's. Now he says, but Cardinal Wiseman, and we have a note here given to us by the author, and he tells us that at this very instant during the writing of this chapter, Cardinal Wiseman died. And he says we're going to continue to write this chapter with using his name since his replacement has not yet been named, so as to expedite the finishing of the book and the printing of the book. People can add the new cardinal's name in his place when the time comes. But he wasn't going to hold up the book and rewrite this chapter because Cardinal Wiseman had died. So in any reference we make to Wiseman is still a reference to the cardinal's hat and the office that the cardinal possessed and the attempt to establish a new government in England. He says, but Cardinal Wiseman is but a sovereign deputy. Okay, he's a deputy of a higher power. That power being the self-styled King of Kings and Lord of Lords in Rome, the Pope. He says, behind him stands the pontiff. Pope Pius IX, the King of the Roman States, is present with us in the person of Cardinal Wiseman. Okay, here is what we need to understand about a cardinal. When you cast your eyes upon a Roman Catholic cardinal, you are literally casting your eyes upon the person of the current pope, no matter who he is. A cardinal is simply the pope in a different face. Okay? That's how close the cardinals are to the popes. When you see a pope, it's as if you were looking, when you look upon a cardinal, it's as if you were looking upon the pope himself. That's how much power he wields. Okay. He is the real head of the new kingdom. That is, the Pope is the real head of the new kingdom, which is rising on the soil of Great Britain. The power by which it is upheld and the authority by which it is ruled emanate from him and are his. And every subject of that kingdom, looking beyond the cardinal, recognizes in the pontiff, the Pope, his supreme lawgiver and king. Okay, carefully understand what James A. Wiley is telling you. From the Vatican's point of view, he is your king and your ruler. He is your lawgiver. And he will never accept no for an answer. The papacy will be the king and the ruler of every land, and that's how he views you. Now, you can dissent if you like, but if the papacy operates as it always does and eventually gains complete control of the civil government, then Roman Catholic canon law will be applied to you by force. The civil laws will conform to Roman Catholic canon law, and whether you don't like the Pope or not, whether you think he is the Antichrist or not, whether you pay any verbal or any type of allegiance to him in any fashion, you must obey him, or you go to jail, or you be imprisoned, or you be fined, or you have your property taken away from you and distributed to someone else more liking of the Pope, or you be killed. That's the way it's always been in Roman Catholicism. The Roman Catholic canon law says every human person must be subject to the Roman pontiff. Now, if you're a subject willfully, all well and good, according to the Pope. But if you rebel, if you are a subject in name only, then you are his to do with as he pleases. And if he pleases to torture you, to steal your children away from you, to alienate your wife from you, to get you fired from your job, to confiscate all of your property, to redistribute it to whomever he pleases, to make you a slave, to stretch you on the rack, to whip you till the flesh falls from your bones, to burn you at the stake, it is his sole prerogative to do so. So saith the man of sin, the son of perdition, the Antichrist of the Bible. So saith every pope throughout the history of the Roman Catholic Church, including the current Pope, Pope Francis I. It's all been long ago established in Roman Catholic canon law. It was the law under which the papacy ruled all of Europe up until the time of the Protestant Reformation. The world never saw liberty until the Protestant Reformation. And to the extent that Protestant liberty still exists in the world, to that extent the papacy will meet to destroy it and to reassume himself all the prerogative that he lost, all the land that he lost, all the governments that he lost. Everything that the papacy lost at the Protestant Reformation is being restored to the papacy today. And your own government, the government that you call yours, is helping him to achieve that renewed status. They're doing it through the civil law. They're doing it through the military. They're doing it through the schools. They're doing it through the churches. They're doing it through the economic system. They're doing it through trade policy. They're doing it by any and every means at their disposal. And you simply can't resist. That's how hard Antichrist is going to make it for those of us who would rather serve Christ than Antichrist. They control our flesh. While our hearts might be totally yielding to Christ, our flesh belongs to this man of sin in Rome. They can do with us whatever they want. And soon coming will be this cashless society where we'll no longer even carry cash in our pockets. And if they want to confiscate our wealth, all they have to do is punch in a command in a computer and you are penniless. That's total control. That's irresistible control. And that's where we're headed. We're almost there. He says the power by which it is upheld and the authority by which it is ruled emanate from him and are his. And every subject of that kingdom, looking beyond the cardinal, recognizes in the pontiff his supreme lawgiver and king. But inasmuch as the cardinal is more immediately before us, and is the ostensible head of this kingdom, we shall give to him the prominence and our observations upon the nature and the arrangement of this new and rival monarchy in Great Britain. The first question here is, who is Cardinal Wiseman and what is his rank? The man himself is an ecclesiastic, but his rank and title as cardinal are purely temporal in nature, right? Understand that. A cardinal is first and foremost a civil or a temporal lawman. He deals in earthly things. He deals in regulating the bodies of every human person through the civil law. He is a representative of the King of Kings. First and foremost, the cardinal is a ruler. It says he is a senator of Rome, a member of the electoral college, a prince of the Roman states, and last and highest of all, having regard to his status in our country, as that status is viewed at Rome, he is the representative of the sovereign of the Roman states. Now, have you ever heard that in the end times there will be a revival of the Roman Empire? It's true. The fourth and final beast upon the earth is the Roman Empire, and it is not destroyed until Christ returns. The revival of that Roman Empire began at the very latest in the United States with Vatican Council II. Many would uphold that Roman Empire was restored at the very founding of this country. That very early in the history of the United States was the first Archbishop of the United States established. It was just one archbishopric, one archbishop by the name of John Carroll. But from there it has grown until Protestantism has virtually committed suicide. That's what happened at Vatican Council II. Officially, at least from Rome's point of view, Protestantism completely capitulated at Vatican Council II. In her mind, she's free to do anything she wants. She represents a political mandate that Washington cannot resist. She now controls the souls of over 50% of the population. Anyone who is baptized in this country is now, whether they know it or not, whether they like it or not, a subject of the Roman Pontiff. And so that kingdom within a kingdom has grown now to overthrow the legitimate kingdom, the visible government. And Washington, D.C. simply does the Pope's bidding. It's a matter of Roman Catholic canon law that they do so, without objection to the papacy. And so they just go about their day-to-day business and let us figure it out for ourselves. But few of us are willing to understand this. Few of us are willing to even study this. it's much better to live in ignorance than it is to grasp the understanding of this, because with understanding becomes responsibility. That's the natural progression of things. Once you comprehend that you are being attacked from an outside source, then it's your responsibility, your moral responsibility, to resist. And since resisting is very difficult, it's just easier to live in delusion that this is not really happening, as James A. Wiley says it is, and as Tom Fress at Inquisition Update says it is. But ignorance is not bliss. And it's no way to fight a war. A war that won't end until Christ returns. I'll be back tomorrow on Inquisition Update. Thanks for listening.